And today we have a great interview. I have the honor of interviewing Chief Gillespie. He's the president of FirstNet. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your history, and what FirstNet is.
Well, certainly. Thanks, Mark, for having me on. I appreciate it. Just to start, I started as a volunteer firefighter, standing on the back of a tailboard of a fire engine. Then got hired full-time as a firefighter in 1980 and served as a firefighter EMT, and a firefighter paramedic in the first parts of my career, and served the balance of my career, as you mentioned, as a fire chief in different organizations around the country. So I've had a great opportunity to visit with people and learn my craft as I came up, and had an opportunity to work with great folks all around the country. And as you mentioned, I'm the past president of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, which is where I really got started looking at what was going to become FirstNet. After 9/11, the 9/11 Commission report came out, thick tome, probably 1,000 pages of documents, and it came up with some recommendations. One of the recommendations that had not been dealt with come 2008 was communication between public safety. We've worked with what's land mobile radios, the portables that we have. LMRs is the technical term, is what people are using now, but it's our walkie-talkies, our radios. That was our primary communication. But as you know, communication is changing dramatically, and our ability to communicate above and beyond our radios, and including continuing to use them, had to do with communicating through what is now smartphones in the last decade, slightly more, and through the medium like you and I are doing right now, live streaming through iPads and computers, things like that. That ability for public safety was not there because we didn't have the bandwidth to deal with that. So there became what was known as the D block, was 10 megahertz of spectrum that was available for auction. And public safety had another 10 megahertz that we were controlling before that. But with a 20 megahertz system, we would be able to do all the things that we're talking about here, live streaming, texting back and forth. And our hope was, when we started talking about this, was when things went wrong, when there was a disaster, or even if there was just a major event, take the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Chicago, or the Boston Marathon, or anything like that. What happens now is, as you know, is if everybody starts streaming pictures, the network shuts down. Yeah. It's overloaded. The commercial network is not designed for that. The problem is that means public safety can't communicate also. Plane goes down in the Hudson, first responders couldn't communicate. So we wanted this 10 megahertz of spectrum to be available for public safety for us to build a network. We were naive enough to believe that we knew what we wanted, and that because it was the right thing to do, and we weren't asking for any money for us. That was not our goal. It was just to make communications better. We decided we would go to Congress and ask for that 10 megahertz of spectrum just for public safety. And we thought that was a slam dunk, but it wasn't. It was worth a lot of money, billions of dollars, and they weren't willing to give that up easily.
Let me ask you a question on that, because we have 9/11, right? And then you guys go to Congress and you say, hey, we have a problem. Here's the solution. This is what we need. And like you said, it should have been a no-brainer. Okay, we can do this. What were the issues? Because here we are, we're trying to, we're thanking our first responders. We're going out of our way to kind of hug you guys and, really appreciate you. But then you get to Congress and there it's bottleneck. What happened there?
Well, let's remember 9/11 was happened in 2001. It wasn't until 2008 that we were really starting to make some traction with this. And it took another 4 years of us talking to Congress to make this happen. Now, government moves slowly. We understand that. But as mentioned, there's a lot of constituents out there that have some say about how money's spent and where it goes. And it was worth a lot of money for companies like all the big broadband networks. They wanted that spectrum to use for their commercial networks.
Sure.
So we had to counter that, and we had to get enough friends. And remember, this is well, we think it's really important, and there's probably maybe 3 million first responders in the country, both paid and volunteer, and on both fire and EMS and law enforcement. But that's not a lot of people when you think about it for the entire country. So our issue wasn't nearly as important to some other people until we made it that way, and we just take no for an answer.
I'm glad I'm glad you did, because we ask our military, our first responders, to go do things that everybody else won't. They rush in, and then we kind of roadblock them. So I'm glad you were able to get, after some years, get this up and running. You have the blessing of Congress. And how did this transform? How did you get people to adopt it?
So part of the law said that they would stand up an organization within the Department of Commerce through the NTIA called FirstNet Authority. The FirstNet Authority was a standalone agency within that, and that was made up of a board of people that were representative from the fire, EMS, police, private business, both in the technology industry, Homeland Security. So we had some government officials that sat on the board. But here's what we didn't know. We didn't know how to build the network. We had some seed money to work with. Congress gave us $7 billion to start with, but we had to pay that back. We needed a partner. We needed a public-private partnership to make this happen. So the first couple of years of the FirstNet Authority within the government, that standalone piece, was to develop an RFP using expertise, people like myself. We worked through our consulting groups to work to get the public safety viewpoint, what we needed out in the field, developed into an RFP, and adding the technical language that we didn't know enough about. So eventually they put together an RFP and put it out to bid, and the successful bidder was AT&T. So it's still our network. It belongs to public safety. It's always been our network, but AT&T was awarded the bid to build it out. So that meant a couple of things. One is that they had the authority to start developing a network that is for FirstNet network. So they have FirstNet built by AT&T. That's their marketing piece of that. But part of the legislation, because our government very much relies on states' rights, each state had the opportunity to decide through their governor, whether they were going to opt in and have the federal government and AT&T build the network for them, or they were going to opt out, meaning they would have to build it themselves. And that took an education process going around to all 50 states, 5 territories in the District of Columbia, and talking to them about what their needs were and how to make that interesting enough that they would want to opt into this. And all of them are in. What that means is that the individual agencies then have the opportunity to join into FirstNet. Now, FirstNet is out there, available. The core network is going already, and is being built out around the country. What AT&T did is, I think, a brilliant piece on their marketing was they said, look, we know we're building out this network, and we'll make it available to you for priority and preemption. Whenever you need it, you've got it. You don't have to ask for it. You just do it, and that's local control. But they offered their entire network up for that and for us also. And that's 100 to 180 megahertz available If we need it, we just take it.
So basically what you're saying is AT&T, they started building the network and then they said, you know, we're going to give you this much space, but you know what? We're actually going to give you as much space as you need in case of an emergency. So any catastrophe across the United States that is worthy of it, you can do that. So you have the network, and now we're going to get into kind of the technology piece of it. So what I'd like to talk about is like the technology, not so much of the network, but how first responders can kind of use technology to connect with the network and kind of some of the results that you're seeing.
Yes. Okay. So great. So we've had several major events, some hurricanes that have occurred, wildfires that have occurred, where we've been able to use our FirstNet network and stand up the first responders, both locally when the network was overwhelmed, they were able to use their smartphone devices and or their computers to maintain communications when everybody else's devices started to fail. And we've used it for other events. The Boston Marathon was a great example. They took FirstNet network with some of these new devices that are out there, band 14 capable. I think they were using the Sonon device, band 14 capable, and they were able to track where all of their people were at, all their emergency responders, both police and fire and EMS, all three of them, I guess, around the event. So they knew where those folks were at any time. If there was a problem nearby one, they knew who to send immediately. And because the network wasn't overwhelmed for them, and they had priority preemption, that meant they could turn other people off if they needed to, everything except 911 calls. They were able to communicate and directly get people to the incident, wherever it happened to be on the event.
If you guys have a question out there for the chief, by all means, just type it into the Facebook chat room. I know he would love to answer any questions for you. So it's interesting that we have a cell phone network that doesn't go down. Unfortunately, yeah, sometimes we drive through dead cells here and I'm like, oh, but it's good to know that we have a cell phone network that will, or a network, I should say, not cell phone network, that will stay up. Is there anything, any kind of issues with the network, or is it always up?
Well, there are dead spots in the country for any network. So what happens if we have a wildfire in California in a remote area where there isn't communications? Part of the requirement in the contract for AT&T was that they would have what are known as COWS, communications on wheel, or COLTS, communication on light trucks, and or drones that would bring network communications through those devices when there wasn't already a tower up. So those are being deployed around the country already. They've been out on many major disasters, wildfires, hurricanes around our country already, flooding. In the Carolinas right now, they were very effective in using the FirstNet product, in those areas already. It's just a great tool. So one of the other pieces about this is a major portion of the fire service is volunteers. And we also have private entities that provide ambulance service along with the fire service that also is the major provider for emergency transport.
So what's interesting is, and one of the things that really, besides everything else that I read, it's similar to GoldenEye, and I'm not trying to throw in a plug for GoldenEye, but I'm kind of am.
Well, I think you should, because it's
but it's one of the things that when we talk to people, it's really about remote assistance and being able to see what the person sees, being able to talk to somebody, talk to a remote subject matter expert. And the technologies are very similar, where the GoldenEye I could see actually being used on the first respond or on the FirstNet network. When I was reading, and I'm interested in, when I was reading, it says, I saw on your blog or on your site that you had about 150,000 first responders already connected to FirstNet. And you mentioned a couple catastrophes, most specifically within the Carolinas with the flooding. Can you tell me how they use that network, how how this technology, being able to connect to your network really helps save lives and help first responders do their job more effectively?
Absolutely. So when you have a disaster like that, first of all, you do lose communications because towers get blown down and things like that. So we bring in the company brings in the ability to maintain the communications through the cell networks. So we're able to connect. Let's think about knowing where all our first responders are at when they're out at risk in some of these areas. So we were able to keep track of where they were able to keep track of where they were at in real time. And as you begin to do rescues and protect different areas, getting people out, you know where's been searched already and where needs to be searched, where you're able to pinpoint where people need to have some help. Let's say there was a drone flying over that could recognize, or somebody's trapped up in their on their roof or in their attic, trying to get them out of the building, rather than waste time going from house to house, which you eventually have to do, but you can go right to where those people are at and needing help right away. It's just an amazing ability to live stream where folks are in need, and the responders being able to help them immediately.
So
go ahead.
So, well, we have a question, and the question is, in regards to FirstNet. So we have it now, but let's say with the hurricane or the flooding, what would it have been like had these responders not had FirstNet? What would it have been like? What would have been the result? Can you talk about the how catastrophic it would have been without the technology versus with?
Okay, so imagine you're a first responder and you're blind with everything except perhaps a portable radio. And you're assuming then that a portable radio is going to work in every spot also, because they have the same limitations in that their towers go down also. So the ability to communicate is just a game changer for first responders. If you think about this, how did we communicate prior to the technology we have today? We used just radios. But if the radios fail, we have to rely back on where we were at before. And before radios, we used runners.
No boy.
I mean, that was really the answer. Unless they were within shouting distance, you had to use runners back and forth. So imagine trying to do that over multi-square miles. It's just not effective. So think any emergency disaster that we have, this is as important to us today as the advent of the SCBA, the breathing apparatus firefighters use, or changing from horse-drawn fire apparatus to gasoline and then diesel. It's going to be that kind of change for the fire service for innovations. And we can't even imagine everything that it can use. Take this for instance, and something as mundane as our normal tasks, fire investigations, fire inspections. Take a device like the device you guys are talking about here.
GoldenEye.
Yeah, take GoldenEye, put that on a live streaming device so that the investigators can walk around and talk about what they're doing right now and live feed that back to whoever, and or recording it, so that when they're done doing those inspections or those investigations, that information is already downloaded into their system, and all they have to do is review it and sign it. That saves time and money completely for all the agencies.
What's interesting is in the test that we've done with it, we have something called the whisper chip. That the whisper chip filters out ambient background noise, and we've done some tests. In fact, I'm getting ready to show a video that we did a test with HVAC, two HVAC repair techs, one sitting in the command center, one actually doing the work, and the person in the command center, the remote subject matter expert, was actually telling the tech how to do his job. I can see a similar instance where you do see the person's walking around, it is recording, and it's recording the video. So now you have a two-party interaction, and everything is being recorded. Nothing has to be memorized. You can pay attention. You can direct people. People can sit there and focus. So I do see it being, I do see the abilities of technology like GoldenEye Infinity and other smart glasses out there to really kind of help first responders even further, which brings me to, as a nice segue, and I want to talk a little bit about AR, augmented reality. In terms of firefighting and augmented reality, have you had any experience using any of the AR tools that are out there now? And if so, can you talk about it?
Well, because my career really started way back when, just as my career was coming to an end, we started to use for training purposes, things like reality or enhanced reality training, where you didn't have to be out in the field to envision how you would respond. So put on the headset. You're sitting in the station house with the members of your crews. You're all working just like you would on scene. You are visually going through the prop building through your augmented reality, and you're learning things that you couldn't learn safely, and you're getting way more experience, because one of the problems for us in the fire side is there are less fires than there used to be, but they are one of the most dangerous things that we have to face. So getting the experience, particularly as a commander level, leader of companies, lieutenants and captains, being able to recognize fire conditions through these augmented realities, they'll be able to see things that at a certainly more frequent basis than they would otherwise, and learn fire behavior to help protect their members when things go bad.
What are some, I agree with you. And there's always challenges, though, for adoption. Every industry has an adoption challenge. What are some of the biggest challenges that the first responder community is facing in terms of adopting technology to use in the field?
Well, part of it is generational. So the people my age who are in charge of things may not see the value that the people in the lower part of the organization do on an everyday basis. Not to say we're all dinosaurs, but we may not see the usefulness for it and be able to justify the expenses for that. So part of that is generational, getting a change over to seeing something beyond the portable radio that we lived with forever. The other part of that is how do we convince our budget people, the people who are going to allow us to have budgets, our local officials that are either elected or appointed, why it's a good thing for public safety. And we talked about how that worked on the national level and how difficult that was. And now we have all of the local agencies that need to see this. Some are very good, and some just need the same thing we do. They need an education, which is part of what we expected or wanted to develop through the FirstNet Association. So when we created the FirstNet Association, myself and my two partners, we said, look, our mission is to further FirstNet, to make it available to people out there and have them understand what that does for them. So we have a very low membership fee. It's $45 a year right now. And we don't allow corporate members. We do individuals only right now, because we want to make sure that the people get a chance to learn more about this. So our mission is to take the end users, get them in with the hardware and the software, the applications, and all the tools that are available to the people that are making those for them, get them to learn about FirstNet, because not everybody knows about it. They haven't been dealing with this for the last 10 years like the rest of, or like some of us. So to get education, we'll do it regionally. We're going around the country. I mentioned earlier, our next event is November 14th in the Denver area. We'd love to have anybody that wants to get on the FirstNet Association.org. If you're already a member, you can come to that conference for free. It's a one-day shot, and we'll have information on our website. If you're not a member already, you can join. I think I'm guessing the conference will probably be about $100, and 45 of that will go, and you become a member also. So it's very inexpensive. And we want to bring in the vendors who want to bring in FirstNet Authority, so they can talk about what they have and how that relates to the people, and the people can ask direct questions. Well, we're thinking about doing this, but how do we get grants for this? Because our agency's kind of poor, so we'll help provide that information for them.
You know, it's funny. I'll go back to the grants. You hear our elected officials in all their glory. They talk about how when a tragedy happens, we love our first responders, and then you get to the reality of trying to get funding, and it's a whole different ballgame. We got to talk about that. Let's get that in committee. So I'm glad that you guys are able to do things, and I think if we're going to be spending money on watching shrimp exercise on a treadmill, maybe we could take some of that money and throw it into that's the reality of it. We've all seen these government studies, and throwing that into something that's really worthwhile, because I can't think you don't really need a first responder until you need a first responder. And it's if you don't have one and they can't connect and they can't get to you, we're talking about something that saves lives. I think what you guys are doing is brilliant. I think the fact that you're bringing technology and making sure that we have this network that's up and people can communicate, because at the end of the day, this is all about saving lives. And I think that's what people really need to know. This is about saving lives, and the technology is only going to enhance people's ability to save lives.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. That's exactly right. So I appreciate the opportunity here. Did we have any more questions from the audience out there? If not, well, we'd love to have them reach out to the FirstNetAssociation.org and become part of who we are. Yeah.
Well, just so you know, what we're going to do is after this video is done, I'm going to edit it. I'm going to put it on our website. I can send you a link and then you can send it out, because I think this was really informative, and it's nice to be able to talk to somebody who is actually in the mix, actually not only we need to do this, but actually going ahead and doing something. Chief, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your years of service, and thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. I've always been a very fortunate guy to be able to be involved. Thank you.